All right, I did not get a chance to grade your tests yesterday. I hope to get them done tonight so you can get them back tomorrow. We are going to go over the tests for chapters 9 and 10, but I want to change the order around a little bit. And I want to make sure that I go no longer than till about 10:30 today, because I want to give you a little bit of time to look at this on your own, maybe play with it on your own, etc. What we're going to do, I just decided, I went out and was watching some videos yesterday, and one video was pretty good, and I actually took what the guy put in there and kind of used that as a template to start, and then built this. So this is my, this is my Alfano's page with Bootstrap. Okay, and you can see it right here. All right, and it doesn't look bad. I mean, it's not fantastic. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but it's very responsive. All right, now, when I say it's very responsive, it's going to look a little funky when we get to a certain point. Let me show you what I mean. All right, notice that. Instead of going like this, all right, and going to this, basically, when it starts to break, it breaks, and it looks a little funky. And the reason for that is that the width of these things, they're called cards. You're going to see what they are in just a minute. The width is a little bit too big to actually hold all of them. This one, one of them was a little bit too wide. All right, and I didn't notice that till this morning. But I mean, it's fine. It's like I said, it's not the best page that's ever been created, but you'll notice in here, there is a slideshow. There's some stuff about sandwiches, the Alfano family, and I just pull pictures off the internet, all right? So, and there's a few other things that we'll talk about. But as we get into this, what I'd like all of you to do, please, is just go out to getbootstrap.com. That's actually the name of the website. You may or may not have heard the story about this, but literally, Bootstrap used to be called Twitter Bootstrap because it was created by two gentlemen who worked at the time at Twitter. To my knowledge, they have since left Twitter, and this is their product. So I don't know if there's a backstory to that or not. It really doesn't matter. Now, one thing I've mentioned to you is, and you've seen this kind of stuff before, we've talked about it a little bit, and that is when you start to change versions of software, there can be very major changes. There was a major change going from Bootstrap 4 to Bootstrap 5, all right? And if you look down here, it says currently they're in version 5.1. And if I go under all releases here, you'll notice that it started with version 1. There were a few different fixes, etc. A lot of them in version 2, couple in version 3, several in version 4, and now we're here in version 5. All I'm telling you is typically, for example, I know for sure that when they went from version 2 to version 3, anything that ran in version 2 would almost be guaranteed to break in version 3. Same when you went from 3 to 4. Not sure from 4 to 5, but in my never-ending quest to give you the latest and greatest, I've decided to go into 5 anyway, even though I know very little about it. All right? So that's the one that we're going to look at today. Now, when you do this to get started, here's a surprise. You can click Get Started. All right? And this is an introduction. I'm not going to read a lick to you, but I just do want to mention under here that there are different ways of getting started. All right? What do I mean? Well, you know this as well as I do, that we could come in here, I could start up a new session here of, in fact, I'm going to get rid of this. This is something I was doing for the other class. You don't have to do this. I'd rather have you watch what I'm doing, to be honest with you. I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it junk because that's going to be all it is. And inside of junk, I'm just going to create my own, oops, I don't want to, well, I don't really need a folder. I'm going to just create an index.html file. All right, again, you do not have to do this. All right, so I've got that in there. And now I want to go back in this junk folder, and I just want to open it in code. All right. Now, I think you'll all agree, there's nothing in there right now, okay? But if I go back here, there are different ways that I can do this. And I want to show you two of the ways that are probably the most popular. All right, and the first is to do this. Kind of as we've been doing, to hit the exclamation point and tab, you know what that does. There's nothing new in there. All right, but I'm going to open up a new line right before the end of my head section, and I'm going to open up a few lines right inside of my body section. So first I'm going to go here into my head section, right there. All right. Then I'm going to go back and into Get Bootstrap, I'm going to grab this Quick Start and this thing that says CSS right here. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard and I'm going to paste it in. All right. You may or may not know of this, and if you don't, shame on your darn instructor for not showing you. But you go to View here and Word Wrap, and that makes it a lot easier to read. All right, because that'll automatically wrap for you. All right, so that's the first thing. So I've added this. This is basically not your CSS. This is Bootstrap's CSS. Did you all hear me? Now, I don't have this yet, but let's assume for a second that I came in here and I created a folder and I called it CSS. And then I went into this folder and I created a new file that was called styles.css. All right, so I had that. And I'm not putting anything in here. You with me? I'm not putting anything in here. But what I'm telling you is, if I've got my own CSS file, make sure to put it after, not before the Bootstrap CSS file. All right, so again, I would come in here, css/styles.css like that. So that's the first thing. Second, I can come down here, go back into getbootstrap.com, and notice there's a JS, and it's got bundle, and it's got separate. The one I always use is bundle, the first one. So I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. You want to put that historically, and people still do it this way, on the very bottom of your body section, right before your ending body tag. So I'm going to paste that in. All right. Now, on both of these, you'll notice that it says integrity equals, and it's got a bunch of stuff in there, and cross origin equals, and it's got a bunch of stuff in there. That's all put in for security reasons. There are literally checks you can make to make sure that no one has changed that file. I'm not going over any of that stuff. That's not my forte, so to speak. But that's what that is. All right. So then I can come in here, and I can type in, for example, just hello world. That's it. All right. I can save, and I can bring it up with live server, and it's not going to look like much of anything. It's got hello world. Okay. No biggie. All right. Well, let's say I don't want to do that. So I'm going to highlight all of this and get rid of it. Now it's gone. So I'm going to go back to Get Bootstrap, and you'll notice that when I go down a little further, there's a thing called a starter template. All right, and it's got most of the stuff that we've looked at before: HTML, tag, header, tag, with our char set and our viewport, and it's already got the Bootstrap CSS in there. All right, and the only thing that's in the body really is in there. Now, it says here that you should choose one of these two. All right, Bootstrap Bundle with Popper, or separate Popper and Bootstrap JS. I'm just going to copy the whole thing, and we'll talk about what they are in just a second, okay? So I'm going to go back into here, and I'm just going to paste the whole thing in. And there it is. All right. Now, if I save this and go back, again, what you're going to notice is it doesn't look any different, because it's basically the same thing. So many people, when they start with the starter template. Now, let's talk about the stuff that's in here. This is the same as the thing that we put in before, so there's nothing new there. All right. And when we go down a little further, it says optional JavaScript, choose one of two. And this first one says Bootstrap Bundle with Popper. What you can do with Bootstrap, you've all seen these kind of things, is you can create pop-ups. What's a pop-up? Well, usually it's something where you right mouse click and you bring something special up after you right mouse click. That's typically a pop-up. So if we leave the one that's in here, it basically includes a bunch of stuff for us, and you don't have to worry about what this is. All right. And it says if you want a separate popper file and a separate Bootstrap file, so if you don't want them all together, you can remove this one and use this one. All right. Now, there is stuff in the documentation that you can read that I'm sure explains it much more eloquently than I just did. But I just wanted you to know that. Now, the other thing I want to show you about this is notice that in both this link line here and in this script line here, notice how the first thing that comes up is CDN. CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. What that means is in order for you to be able to run this, you will need an internet connection. So if you're on a train and you're going through tunnels, or you're in your car, etc., and you're driving with somebody, hopefully you're never in your car driving and working on your computer. All right, I've seen people do it, but please don't. In that case, if you don't have Wi-Fi in your car, it's probably not going to work. All right. Now, what if, so you say, well, geez, I want it to work all the time. Can I make it work all the time? The answer is yes. So I'm going to go back here into Get Bootstrap, and I'm going to jump back up under here. All right. And from where we were at first, we just click Get Started. I'm going to go back there in a minute. But notice there's a download. And you can download, as it says, ready to use compiled code. You can download the source files. Why would you maybe want to do that? Well, the main reason that you would is it is permissible for you to go into this bootstrap.css and the bootstrap.js file and make changes in them. I wouldn't recommend it when you've got 5 minutes of Bootstrap experience under your belt. But I'm just saying, if you really know what you're doing, you can do that. I've never felt the need to go in there. If there was something I wanted to overwrite that Bootstrap is doing that I don't like, I put it in my own CSS file. All right? But I'm just telling you that you can download this, and if you do, and you download it without using a CDN, then you do not need an internet connection. With most people today, when you're working on this stuff, you're working on it at school or at work or at home, and probably 99 times out of 100, you have an internet connection. The reason I'm telling you that is virtually everyone that I know uses the CDN way of downloading their stuff. All right, especially, like I said, when they're first starting out. All right, so I'm going to jump back in here. So there's some stuff in here. I may have missed something. I don't think I have, and I have certainly not tried to. All right, but notice what they explain in here. They even explain what the doc type is, what the meta tags are, all right, some other stuff, etc. All right, but what I want to do is I'm hoping you're all where I am right now, and I want you to look at what's over here. All right, we have pretty much gone through most of the important stuff in the introduction, except for one thing, and that is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to click on accessibility. One thing about Bootstrap is it was written from the get-go to basically bake in accessibility. And again, we're talking about people who have any kind of what is considered to be an impairment, whether it's sight, whether it's hearing, whether it's something else. And you're going to see when we start going through this and we put in and look at some of the stuff that's in here, what's going to happen is there'll be a lot of times when something will either say data/ARIA or just ARIA something. That ARIA is all done for accessibility, just so you know. So like I said, it's all in there. You can read this stuff if you have an interest. I'm not going to say anything else about it other than that. All right, now I'm not going to do this in order. So in other words, I'm not going to go to customize, then the layout, then the content. First of all, I'm not going to talk about all of them. But the one that's most important to you, there's really two. The first one, which we'll talk about first, is components. So I'm going out to components. All right. This has literally, if you started counting these, I don't know how many there are, 20 or whatever, but these are a bunch of things that, again, are baked right into the language. So in other words, and again, if you want to do this and follow me, fine. If you don't, just watch, because I'm going to do just a ton of copy and pasting. That's why I didn't know if it was worth your time to be following along like that. But I'll just start with accordion here. And you'll notice there's an example accordion. All right, you can see how it works. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this entire thing of code. I can either do that or I can click copy up here. So I'll just click copy. All right, now I'm going to come down into Visual Studio Code and I'm going to remove that hello world. I don't need it. I'm going to replace it with that. So all I did was I put that in. I'm going to save. I'm going to go back here to my running file, which is now pretty big. But you can see I now have an accordion. Now I'd have to go in and change. I'd have to go in and change the text that's in there probably to suit my own needs. And by default, I think one of these is open at all times. There is another way to do it when they're all closed. All right. But by default, just with the one I grabbed, that's the way that it's set up. All right. So I am going to hit on most of the things that are in here, just so you know. So next is alerts. All right. A key thing to realize about Bootstrap is it works with colors. All right. Now, this is not a great example, but I do want you to see these colors. What you're going to notice in just a minute, we're going to look at primary in another context. It's not really that color. It's more a royal blue. You're going to see that in just a second. Secondary is kind of a gray. Success is a green. Danger is a red. Warning is a yellow. And information is a lighter blue, etc. Plus, there's almost always a light in the dark. All right, we're going to build this stuff pretty quick, but I just want you to see that. Why is that important? Well, again, I'm going to grab, if I grab this code, I'm not going to, and I put it in there, this is what it's going to look like. All right, so why would you maybe want to do that? You might want to put something in that says something, if you want to give somebody an alert, depending on the severity of it, and tell them, hey, there's a newer version of this available just so you know. Something like that. All right. So again, I'm not going to copy that code in because that's just going to give you these. All right. Badges. People like badges for whatever reason. So maybe you've done this where you've taken a course online or you've done something online when you go through a tutorial, and they'll let you know how far you've gone at a certain point. All right. Or maybe when you're finished, you get this little electronic badge that's on the screen that you, if you want to, you could go and actually make a copy of it or whatever. Those are badges. All right. And you'll notice that in here, everything they've done using secondary, and that's why they're that color. All right. So why am I telling you that? Because not the next one, but the one after that, we're going to look at buttons and we're going to look at the color. All right. Next is breadcrumbs. It's always considered nice to let the user know exactly where they are, so you can build in breadcrumbs. Notice how they're built in here. All right. They're just lists. Now they put it in here as an ordered list. All right. But again, they've turned off any list style type in here. All right. Why would you think they'd make it an ordered list? Because there is order to this, right? You're in this folder, which is in this folder, which is etc. All right. Now, buttons, if you look here, this is probably the thing that some people really get turned on by, and other people could care less. These are the major colors. So primary, like I said, to me, that's kind of a royal blue. Secondary is a gray. Success is green. Danger is red. Warning is yellow. Info is kind of that light blue. Now notice the light, all right, and the dark, and there's a link. You can, if you take a link like that, if you take any hyperlink in Bootstrap, listen to this, if you take any hyperlink in Bootstrap and you give it a class of BTN, you can make it look exactly like one of these. There's nothing special that you have to do. If you want it to stay a link, you can use BTN link, and then it looks like your typical hyperlink. All right. Again, more stuff in there about assistive technologies. Notice that by default, of course you can change this, but by default, the size of the button will depend on the text that you put into it. That's why you probably don't want a button that's just humongous. It's got 10 or 12 words in it. All right. Now, there's outline buttons. Notice these. They don't change until you hover over them. So up here we said BTN, BTN primary, and that gave us this one. Then when we go down to here, we've got BTN, BTN outline primary. And you can see the difference. I'm not going to highlight each one of them. Hopefully that makes sense to you. All right. You can set button sizes. There's a large one. There's a small one. They're medium by default. All right. But you can set those if you want to or need to do that. You can disable a button. A disabled button shows, but nothing happens when you click it. That should make sense to everybody. All right. Block buttons, what they're saying right here is the button is going to take up the entire length of the screen. I'm sorry, the entire width of the screen. All right. But again, as they say, you can adjust that. There's different ways. What you end up doing in here, if you take a look, is Bootstrap is basically the ability to add Bootstrap classes onto just about anything. That's what it is. All right. In fact, in this thing that I showed you before, just to show you this, I'm going to right mouse click. I'm giving you the source code to this. I've got a hard copy. All right. But when I do this and I do a view, just so you know, that's all of my CSS that I put in there. That's it for the whole thing. And if I didn't do that, and if I didn't make the max height of my, that's the main image right here. All right, you can see how big it is. That's how big it was. Now this is at, I mean, if I bring it down back down to 100%, that's what it looks like now. So I cut the height of it down from the default to 500 pixels. Other than that, everything that I used in here, they're all Bootstrap classes. All right. So there's a couple more things in here. Where it says Sass, what Sass is what's known as a CSS Pre-Compiler. Some just call it a CSS compiler. What you can do, and this won't make a lot of sense probably to you three if you have not had any programming experience, but you can go in and you can actually create CSS variables. All right, and you can do different things with them. All right, the day may come here where we implement that into this class or one of our classes. I don't know. All right, mix-ins are the same kind of thing, but it's another way of doing it, so that's fine. All right, you can put buttons in a group. Looks pretty bad right there, but you can do some CSS to make them look a little nicer. All right. What we're going to use pretty extensively in this, because we're going to build this thing, even though I'm giving you the source, we're going to build it together, all right, is more and more people are using cards because they're almost like a playing card, but you can put whatever you want to put on them, all right? And when you start looking over here, I mean, there's different kinds. So you'd put an image here, typically a title here, some text, and a button. All right. For instance, let's suppose, I'm not doing this, you're not doing this unless you want to do that for your project. But let's suppose that what I wanted to do was I wanted to build a website for the St. Louis Cardinals. All right. Then I could literally get a picture of each player, put that there, put their name here, a little bit of stats, and if they had a home page, I could have it go right to their home page. Or maybe, United States presidents. We could do something like that. All right. So there's different ways that you can set this up. Notice in this case, we don't have an image. Here we've got, again, it says another image, places an image on the top of the card here, but we don't have the button and we don't have the title, etc. So there's different ways that you can set this up. I don't want to waste your time by going through all this stuff. All right. So the next is a carousel. Literally, to get this carousel to work, pretty much. Now, again, I'm not going to lie to you. And that is, let me go out to YouTube. And I meant to put this in your this, but I will send you a link to it. So let's see. Bootstrap. Yeah, I think that one will probably work. I started watching a couple of these, and there's nothing wrong with any of them, okay? But to be honest with you, they're over an hour long, right? And it just got to be too tedious. So I started looking for one that was smaller, and I found one that was 5 hours. That'll probably teach you everything you want to know, all right, if you got the time. But I went back and grabbed this one from coding, and I'll send you the link just so you have it, okay?
As a former software developer at Uber, who's trained hundreds of new for this row.
And you can see I didn't even watch all of it. And I want to show you, let's see this. There. So this is the one that he built in it. So in many ways, it'll look similar to the one you're doing. In many ways, it'll look different. But, I'm to the point where sometimes the best way to teach you is to take an existing finished product, make it kind of my own, but base it off of something that I know works. All right. And again, so in here, there's the carousel. This is one of many carousels. I can either click here, or I can click here, either one. And there's other ways that you can set it up. All right. So I grabbed, I think it was the second one here, the one with the controls, this one. No, it was with indicators, this one. And I basically just changed that code. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I can't tell you what everything that's in there means. I know, for example, when you look here, D block means display it as block. W100 means the width should be 100%. So some of it, when you look at it, it'll probably just make sense when you think about it a little bit. Some of the rest of it, probably not. But again, I'm giving you the resource where you can go out and find out about it. The one I wish I had used was this one. And you might want to go back in and change that when you do it, because we could have put a label on there. So for each one of those pizzas, I could have put something in there. I didn't. It worked. It was already 8 o'clock, and I didn't feel like playing with the computer anymore. So I said, pardon my French, screw it. And that's all I did. All right. Close button. That X right there, all right, you can use that to literally close something. So you can open up your own what's called modal window. So I can open up a window that says, before you go on, you must register, to use this site or get an account or whatever. And I could basically set it up so they couldn't go any further until they did that. But eventually they'd want to close it, so you'd have an X in here. Collapse, as it says, toggle the visibility of content, across your project with a few classes and our JavaScript plugin. What the heck does that mean? Well, look on the screen. Think you'd agree we've got the hamburger menu. That's a collapse. There it is. And if you look at the one that I didn't do very much special to do that. But there's my menu. It doesn't go anywhere. Just so you know, it doesn't go anywhere. But I've got the same thing. All right. And collapse is used in, there's in other places too, but they give you some examples. Typically, as it says, it's done to hide content. Notice it says it's applied during transitions. Well, I didn't do this, but we could have added some of the material that you saw in chapter 16 the other day when we talked about transforms and transitions. And we could have made, when you're doing that slideshow, we could have made the one slide fade out and while the other one fades back in, for example. So there's a lot of ways you can use the built-in stuff in conjunction with your own stuff. All right, drop downs. With most people, they're pretty obvious what a drop down is. If you look right here, there's a drop down. All right. You can take a button and make it into a drop down. And I don't know if they show it in here. Directions. All right. That's not what I want to show you. There's a drop right. If there's a drop right, there's a drop left. And there's actually even a drop top. In fact, if you look up on the screen here, this is the bottom of that thing that we're going to create. And if you go to social media, notice it's at the bottom of the page. So it goes up. All right. Could have had it go down, but it made more sense to have it go up. All right. List groups, as it says, you can set up list groups. You can make one active. You can disable one or more. You can set up links with them, etc. So there's a bunch of stuff you can do with this. All right, the accordion, whoops, going the wrong way. The modal I mentioned to you. So again, there's an example of a modal dialog right there. All right. Now, where it says modal text goes here, of course you'd have something else. All right, and the idea is what they're telling you is, do you want to save your changes? So you'd have to wire that up, or you can just click close. All right. Typically, you can either click close or click the X to get yourself out. Navs and tabs. There's a basic nav. We're not going to use that. We're going to use a nav bar. All right. They work very similarly to one another. And take a look at it. You might decide, you know what, I like them better. Well, then you use that one. All right. But the one we're going to use is a nav bar. So again, if I come in here and I start looking, okay? So for instance, if I want this nav bar that's right here, all right, the one you see on your screen, I'm going to click copy here. I'm going to go back into the file that I had. I'm going to remove all that stuff that I put in there. I really don't need that accordion, so I'm going to remove it. Notice it's quite a bit of code. All right, so I'm back in here. There, back at my body. I don't need that div either. And I'm going to paste that in. All right, and I'm going to save it. So file, save. Now if I go and run this again, you'll notice what I have. All right, and it's, why is it showing it like that? I don't know. Probably because of the size I've got this at. There. Okay. Now a couple things, they're minor, but just so you see them. First of all, I'm going to go back to where we just were. All right, and where we've got nav bar light, I can pick any of those things we had before, secondary, primary, etc. So let's put primary here, and let's put primary here. Save, go back, and take a look at it. Is that pretty obvious what we just did? Now, if you like that, use that. Most people either choose here nav bar light, or they choose nav bar dark. Now, with a lot of people, they don't like the dark because they think it is literally just too dark. That automatically goes in and makes your text white. All right. Couple more things about this. Let's say, you know what, I'm looking at this and I don't like the search bar. I don't want a search bar there. All right. Well, when I start looking in here, I'm just going to right mouse click, or I'm going to do Control F for search, and I'm going to type in search. There it is. So it's a form in here that allows me to put in a search bar. Does that make sense to people? All right. So I'm just going to grab all of that, and I'm just going to remove it. Go back and take a look, and now I have no search bar. All right. Now, another thing is, be kind of nice to be able to take these things. These are my links, and put them over here. All right. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to find where I start this unordered list. It's over here someplace. Unordered list. All right. And I'm going to add another class to it that says MS. I think this is right. MS left. Hit enter. Save. Oh, that didn't work. So let's see. Where is it? Okay. I only got all of it wrong. So we're going to try ML Auto. See if that works. I bet you it still didn't. How about MS Auto? We'll fix it. All right, on the copy that I have, it works. I don't know why this isn't working, but you can move it over. Well, I got it to center. All right. So there are a bunch of different nav bars in here. If I decided, for instance, I didn't want that drop down, I find the UL here. Notice it says class equal drop down. So I got to grab the whole UL that's there. Well, there it says drop down right here. Nav drop down. So I don't want any of this. Whoops. So I'm going to go from here all the way. I think this is right. If I screw it up, it's no big thing. And I come back, and now my drop down's gone. All right. This one is given active, and that's why it's lighter. This is where it is regular, but notice if I put my mouse over it, how it looks, how it looks. And this is disabled. If I don't want the one that says disabled to literally be disabled, I go over here where it says nav link disabled, and I just remove the word disabled, and now it's not disabled. So I can put my mouse over it just like I did the other one. All right. So again, Nav Bar is one you're going to use a lot. I don't even know what off canvas is. I've never used it. Pagination, if you want to be able on the bottom of your pages to be able to go back and forth, you've all seen these. It kind of the way that it looks on a, where you've got, for example, you've got an arrow that looks like this. That's a terrible example. Points like that. Another one that maybe says next, previous, and either another arrow that looks like this, or sometimes this says last, and sometimes this says first, but it's a way you can navigate between pages. All right, that's what pagination is. I've never used placeholders like this. Popovers, I've already mentioned that to you. All right, so if you want to basically be able to set up a popover, all right. So notice it says click to toggle popover. See that? Is that pretty obvious? Now, I believe in order to do that, you do need to make sure that popover thing is included. But if you choose either one of those options I showed you, either option 1, which put it all together in a bundle, or option 2, which did them separately, you should have the popovers. Progress bars, again, hopefully that makes sense. And I'll tell you what a lot of students have done in the past, not that you have to or not have to do it, but when you are working on, for example, your electronic portfolio, people have done, they'll put in all their skills, HTML, CSS, etc. And if they think, in HTML, I'm pretty much at 90%, then they'll go in and they'll set up a progress bar to show that. All right. JavaScript, maybe not that great. They might put that at 50% type of thing. All right. Scroll Spy, this is kind of neat. It says automatically update navigation or list group components based on the scroll position. So as you work your way through this, is that pretty obvious what's happening there? Look on the screen. All right. Spinners are just that. Typically, if you're going to make the user download something, you might want to set up a spinner like this to let them know, hey, it's still working. You can even do that, and you'd have to use JavaScript with this, but you could do this in combination with a progress bar. So as they were loading something, the progress bar could get bigger and bigger as you got closer to 100%. Toasts, as it says, and typically a toast is something that when you click on something, it just gives you a quick message, and it's designed to go away quickly. We don't use toasts that much in here. They're used a lot when I teach beginning Android development, especially when we first start. You do a lot of toasts. And then tooltips, which again, hopefully are pretty obvious what they are. All right. As it says, tooltips are everywhere. So here's an example. So notice when I put that, and they should be pretty intuitive. All right. In other words, when you use tooltips, it should be something that could actually use a tooltip. I mean, if you've got a button that says, click me, I wouldn't put a tooltip on it that says, click the button. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes people do that, but I don't really see why. So those are your major components. I want to go through one more thing before we take a break, and that is forms. All right, we've had a whole chapter on forms. We created a form together as a class. Now, when I start going over here and I look at forms and I go over here to overview, all right, and let's just say that we wanted this form right here. It's not a fantastic form, but it looks okay. All right, I can just grab the code that's here. I copied it to the clipboard. Again, I'm going to keep my nav bar, and underneath my nav bar, I'm going to paste that in and hit Control S. So now I've got a nav bar and I've got a form. Now again, notice in here, let me bring this back down, that is at 100%. So right now, there's been nothing that we put in here to do any formatting. All right. And as far as that goes, let me tell you too, we'll see this probably after the break, but let's just say that I wanted to add some margin on the bottom. Let's just say, you can say MB dash and put a number there. All right. Margin top, I can do the same thing with padding. So when you're working through this stuff, if something looks really terrible, you can go to that component and just add those. They're classes, so you can add them. All right. A key thing to realize, and I want to go through this, I probably should be doing a better job of it than I am, but notice there's margin bottom 3. Right there. All right. So label for equals. You know what that is. All right. Class equals. Form label. It's letting it know that it's a label. So they're all labels are supposed to be formatted by default in Bootstrap in a certain way. All right. Then here's where it gets a little different. So input type equal email. Notice here, class equal form control. All right. And then the ID. Then there's some of this ARIA stuff that I told you before that has to do with accessibility. All right. But the bottom line is this: form control, form text, form check label. So there's a bunch of these things that you can put in here. They will all have certain derivatives of the form class. All right. And again, if you want more, because I'm not giving you a ton, but you can start taking a look through here. All right. And when you run through here, notice how they break it up. There's the select. You already know what that is. You made one of those. We did that for the states. All right. Checkboxes and radio buttons, we looked at those. Range is just that. It allows you to give this a range. Now, typically when you use a range like this, when you look here, so I can take and drag this, almost always, all right, this is going to have some JavaScript in it to actually make sure that you can put on the screen where you are, etc. Input groups, so you can combine different stuff together. Floating labels, again, this might be something you'd want to use or you'd never want to use. Layout, as it says, there are a bunch of utilities that you can put in here for this. So notice here's an example that doesn't have the labels. All right. Here's an example that has gutters. Why would you want that? Well, this right here and this look pretty much the same, but you can control the space between if you're going to have multiple controls on the same line. And validation. As it says, provide valuable, actionable feedback to your users with HTML5 form validation via browser default behaviors or custom styles and JavaScript. So to get the true experience, what we will do later, and when I say later, I mean fairly soon, but once we get into JavaScript, is we're going to take that same form that we put in and we're going to add additional validation to it using JavaScript. All right. Let's see. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, so far we've gone over here the getting started, we went over the forms, and we went over the components. I'm going to quickly hit on the other things, then I'm going to give you a hard copy of what we're working on, and we're going to start working on it together. So it's 8:55. Let's please come back at 9:05.